is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. When last we talked with Bob Pollock, it hadn't snowed yet this year. It's snowing this morning.
And it's collecting
all
of a sudden.
It is. It's expected that we get this snow, and we're getting it right at this moment. The roads are, how are they? Are they icing up or anything? Slushing up?
Yeah, it's starting to lay on the roads.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
be careful out there.
Caution driving. Conversation with Mr. Pollock, our traffic reporter, presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. So the snow gets here, and things change before us as we go into full winter mode. Today, we've got school closures, Penns Manor, Purchase Line, Ligonier Valley, United. They're all closed today. Indiana County Head Start Centers, too. But beneath the surface of the ground, on top of the surface, there might be some snow. There's stuff happening underneath, though, isn't there? It's still, the ground is plenty warm.
Yeah, it's still, although it's, might be a little bit cooler than what we may have thought.
Yeah.
Because the snow is collecting.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's still warm enough that there's root activity, and as well as organisms and things that function in there. They're not completely shut down yet.
Yeah, well, that's one of the scientific things that you discover at this time of the year. If you stick a shovel into the ground and pull up a shovel's worth of dirt, about 8-10 inches worth, you're going to find all kinds of things happening.
Right, that's right. Even in the dead of winter, there's probably still things happening a little bit, although at a much slower rate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons we still can plant plants in the fall, is because there's still a grace period here, a time frame where things will continue to grow. They may not grow on top, but if we're trying to establish shrubs and trees and even some perennials, or we moved perennials around, maybe we lifted them, divided them, and replanted them, or we had some plants that we thought were going to work in a certain place, mm-hmm. and maybe for one reason or another they didn't work out, and so I think this will look better if we move it over here. So this time of year we can still do those things. And there'll still be some time yet between now and when the plants shut down, that they'll put on a little root growth, maybe get knitted in a little bit, yet still have some activity there. And it allows us to partially establish a plant now versus waiting till spring to plant something. And then we have spring when soil temperatures are a little cooler, although they're warming up as we go. Hopefully moisture conditions are ample then. We're starting to get back into a situation where, at least here, where we have a little more moisture in the ground, so plants are able to take that on and get that in their systems and keep them plump and vibrant.
We have talked in the past about if somebody has a live Christmas tree, or it doesn't just have to be that. It can be any tree that you're planting, and you want to go dig that ground while the ground is still soft enough to do that before it freezes up. But if in those situations, or in situations where you want to put in a plant or a shrub right about now, is there anything different that you would do to the soil planting at this time of the year than at some other time of the year, when you know that in a few weeks, in mid-December, that ground is going to really start to freeze solid?
And when we've dug a hole and loosened the soil up, sometimes those spots can actually freeze quicker if we have the cold conditions to do that.
So if we dig it, should we put straw in or something?
Yeah, well, you could mulch it, whether it's bark mulch or straw, just to help protect that and kind of insulate it a little bit, so that if we are going to still plant some plants, that we're able to work the soil when we need to. Or you can dig that hole and bring the soil in, which will also allow it to stay a little bit drier, so that it's easier to work with when you do plant the plant. So if you were going to buy a live ball and burlap Christmas tree, then you'd have that soil put aside It might have a little bit of moisture in it, but not enough that it was saturated where it becomes mud, and then it's really hard to get that soil back down in the hole around that root ball, so that it can be knitted well. It needs to be firmly in there, not overly compacted, but it needs to be firmed up and pressed against there so there's no air pockets down in that hole. When you plant that plant and put that soil back in around, that will, if there is, if you have chunks of soil, or if you have mud, then that can change the consistency and the texture of the soil, and we don't want that. We want to be able to put it back in there, still have air spaces between the soil particles, but it needs to be firmed up and, complete soil around that whole ball of that plant.
People at this time of the year, in this past week especially, we've seen a lot of TV reports of this, of trees landing on houses. So we had one that landed on a car the other day on Indian Springs Road. It's a really, really scary time for folks. When you get those high wind warnings and you look outside and you say, well, gosh, I should have done something with that tree. That if it fell in this direction would land right on top of my house. Obviously, there's not much you can do with a great big tree such as that other than taking it down, and you're probably not going to do that at this time of the year. But we look at our tree health right now, and maybe this reminds us that as soon as it is feasible to have a company come in to take that tree out, maybe this is the time to do it. Here comes winter.
Yeah. That all goes back to proper tree care, plant care. Kind of like brush fires, probably 99% or higher are preventable. Same thing with trees falling. Percentage might not be quite that high, but close. A lot of times, and along the roads, that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
Because you have little patches of woods, you have ground that nobody knows who owns,
Sure.
or they might know, but they're not cared for, let's put it that way, or cared for at the level that they might need to be, because you've got dead trees hanging. I mean, where don't you drive that you might not see a dead tree leaning against a telephone line?
It's everywhere.
A utility line. And somebody owns that, or should be taking care of that, or could be taking care of that preventatively and prevent, accidents and things from happening. And of course, we've had issues. Those trees may not have died on their own. There may have been a pest. They may have been an ash tree, and the emerald ash borer actually, attacked them, killed them, and there they stand. There's pine trees, all over the place that,
whatever.
Same thing. They eventually live their life cycle, or they've been infested with pests for so long that they die, and there they stand, and they stand there till they also become a home for wildlife. So we shouldn't, that's part of the puzzle. And if it's going to fall in the woods and nobody's there, that's one thing. But where we get into public safety and along roadways and on personal property where people are gathering, or public property where people gather, either traffic.
It's a huge pine tree, right? I'm looking at it right now across the street.
Yeah, spruce tree. Been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it might stand for another 30 years there. But that goes back to observing, what's going on with that tree. Is there, whether it's an evergreen or deciduous tree, let's look up in the tree. Are there dead branches up in there? And we had a high enough winds that a lot of roadways had dead branches laying on them here and there, and they might have been small stuff, and they might have been really dead. Mother Nature helps clean things out too, doing that. But also, if it gets into a public safety issue, then we got a bigger deal.
My very, very tall maple trees, I've got 3 of them that if they came down, it would be right there in the house.
Yeah.
So
you got to look at that. Sometimes it's hard to predict when and if, that will happen. Where's it sited? What are our normal winds? But it's not necessarily our normal winds that, we're getting winds from the southwest normally. And sometimes that's not where if you'd follow that pattern,
Sure.
say, oh, well, it'll land here. Well, it might be the opposite that happens, that wind from the east or some sort of swirling activity or, more tornado-type activity, one of those microbursts or something like that, where it's just there's a twisting wind that actually, there's
Trees
enough
actually
tension and torture,
They
torque
learn how
there.
to behave, don't they?
Yeah.
With the winds.
Yeah. And actually, that's right. A tree out in the open, as that tree grows, the wind, it sways. And so it gets stronger. It builds cells and structure there to help it, move in that situation versus a whole cluster of trees that might be in the woods and you go in, oh, there's too many trees here, and you thin it out. And then those other trees, they maybe haven't been able to, they weren't as in the open. They had other trees to help stabilize them, and so maybe they're not as strong as they were together. And so that can weaken things. And of course, we have structural issues. We have decay and things that can get in there. And if we don't train ourselves or don't realize that, oh, well, that dead branch on there, what's going to happen in a year or two from now if I don't remove that and make a good cut on there, remove that dead branch, and allow that tree then to grow new cells to cover that wound over and heal it. If we just leave it there, then yes, it'll continue to decay. It might eventually fall off or pieces of it on its own, but then it might also lead to decay farther into, maybe back into the trunk. And then once that gets opened up, and our conditions here are maybe more prone to that because we have the changing seasons, we have freeze-thaw cycles, we have moisture, we have snow, we have ice, and all that activity can help, break things up, let moisture in there, let it freeze, and then that creates problems, and we get decay, and then that can lead to structural issues, and then more prone to cause problems.
We should have done this segment in October because you're scaring me now.
Well, wintertime can be a good time to look at these things because you can see the tree. In most cases, the leaves aren't on there, so we can observe. We can have somebody that has a trained eye come in and look at that, and you can make
your decisions
about that. Yep.
Very good. Hey, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160.
The calendar says November, but the mild weather says otherwise. There's still time to finish your home remodeling projects before the cold weather sets in.